These people face death, disaster, and the impossible, and somehow, they survived. These are the stories you won't believe are real. Julianne Koepke fell 10,000 feet and survived. In 1971, 17-year-old Julianne was flying over the Amazon when her plane was struck by lightning. It broke apart mid-air, and she fell 2 miles strapped to her seat. Somehow, she survived the fall with a broken collarbone, deep wounds, and no supplies. Then she spent 11 days alone in the jungle, following a stream barefoot until she was rescued. One of the most incredible survival stories in aviation history. Aaron Ralston, trapped in a canyon for 127 hours. He was hiking alone in Utah's Blue John Canyon when a boulder pinned his arm against the wall. For 5 days, Aaron had no food, little water, and no way to escape. Then, in an act of raw will, he cut off his own arm with a dull multi-tool to break free. He rappelled down a 65-foot cliff and hiked 6 miles before being rescued. Yes, 127 hours is based on his story, and it's all real. Harrison O'Keefe survived 3 days at the bottom of the ocean. A tugboat capsized off the coast of Nigeria in 2013. Divers assumed all 12 crew were dead until they found one, Harrison O'Keefe, alive in an air pocket. He had survived 3 days underwater in total darkness with no food, surrounded by dead bodies. He used faith, silence, and sheer calm to stay alive. The footage of his rescue? Absolutely haunting. Beck Weathers came back from the dead on Everest. In 1996, during a deadly blizzard on Mount Everest, climber Beck Weathers was left for dead. Twice. His body was frozen, his face blackened. Everyone assumed he was gone, but he woke up, staggered into camp, and somehow survived the descent. He lost his nose, hands, and vision in one eye, but not his life. They called him the man who walked out of his own grave. Ricky Magee survived 71 days in the outback. In 2006, Ricky Magee was driving across Australia when he says he was drugged and left for dead. He woke up buried in a shallow grave in the middle of nowhere. With no map or food, he survived 71 days by eating insects, frogs, and drinking rainwater from plastic sheets. By the time he was rescued, he'd lost over 130 pounds, but was still alive. Mauro Prosperi, trapped in the Sahara Desert. During a 1994 ultramarathon in Morocco, Mauro took a wrong turn, yet, and ended up in a 9-day survival nightmare. He drank his own urine, ate bats, and found shelter in an abandoned shrine. At one point, he even tried to end his life, but failed. He was found 186 miles off course, delirious but alive. His training saved him, barely. Ada Blackjack survived the Arctic alone. In 1921, Ada, an Inuit woman, joined an Arctic expedition as a cook. When the crew vanished or died, she was left completely alone for 2 years on Wrangel Island. She built snares, hunted seals, read the Bible, and kept a diary. When she was finally rescued in 1923, she had survived starvation, polar bears, and total isolation. No training, just instinct. Joe Simpson crawled back from a broken leg in the Andes. During a mountain climb in Peru, Joe Simpson broke his leg and was left for dead by his climbing partner. But Joe didn't die. He crawled and dragged himself across a glacier for 3 days with no food, no water, and a shattered body. When he finally made it to camp, he was hours from death. He wrote about it in Touching the Void, a story that's almost too painful to read. Alexander Selkirk, the real-life Robinson Crusoe. In 1704, Scottish sailor Alexander Selkirk was marooned on an uninhabited island in the Pacific after a fight with his captain. He spent 4 years completely alone, hunting goats, building shelters, and dodging pirates. When a passing ship finally rescued him, he was healthy and had adapted to island life better than anyone expected. His story later inspired the novel Robinson Crusoe. Apollo 13, the most famous space survival ever. In 1970, NASA's Apollo 13 mission was supposed to land on the moon. Then, an oxygen tank exploded. Stranded 200,000 miles from Earth, 3 astronauts used plastic bags, duct tape, and raw ingenuity to survive in freezing temperatures with limited power. They manually recalculated re-entry, and somehow made it home alive. It was called a successful failure, and remains one of the most unbelievable survival stories in human history. These stories aren't about luck, they're about grit, instinct, and the human will to survive. Against nature, pain, and sometimes the void itself. The body breaks, the mind bends, but somehow they made it back.